is the second and third rounds today. Plenty of Ohio State Buckeyes selected today. 3 yesterday, 4 more today. J.K. Dobbins to the Ravens. Also Malik Harrison to the Ravens. In between that, Devon Hamilton and Jonah Jackson drafted by the Jaguars and Lions, respectively. And last that makes 7 Buckeyes drafted in the first 3 rounds.
Yeah. It's amazing how Cincinnati gets Ohio State guys. Detroit also does. Browns don't.
They're stuck on LSU. We were talking about that earlier. Well, let's welcome in Nathan Baird, Buckeyes beat reporter here on cleveland.com. Nathan, of the guys taken on day 2, those 4 guys that we saw taken today, which ones do you think are set up to succeed that might go on and have an even better NFL career than they had a college career? And they all had pretty good college careers.
Yeah, I don't know if it's easy to predict someone like J.K. Dobbins to have a better NFL career than he did a college career. He rushed for 2,000 yards and 21 touchdowns last year for Ohio State. And it was interesting that he fell as far as he did. He was the 5th running back taken in this draft, which I think surprised a lot of people. Went 55th overall. But he couldn't have gone to a much better situation for someone who runs the ball. The Ravens led the NFL in rushing by almost 1,000 yards last year. They had almost 100 more attempts than the runner-up team last year. It's a team that really thrives on the ground, and he's going to a place that knows what to do. And similarly, I think Malik Harrison going to Baltimore, that was already a really good defense. The one thing that was maybe missing for them was someone to come in and help them stop the run. That was of the few weaknesses they had last year, going 14-2. I think they could have stopped the run a little bit better, and he's somebody that can help them do that.
Well, your point about Dobbins and that running game, obviously the defenses have to worry about Lamar Jackson and may leave an opening that Dobbins might not get with some other team.
Yeah, exactly. And they've also got Mark Ingram. They've got other guys there in that backfield that it's going to be a pretty talented, pretty crowded backfield situation. I think it's interesting, though, that Dobbins has always had a guy that's had kind of a chip on his shoulder, whether it was not running that well as a sophomore, just never seemed satisfied, even when he had great games this past year as a junior. And he's going into a situation where that kind of that kind of mentality is probably going to help him, because there's going to be a lot of competition to get carries in that backfield.
Well, the other thing is he's a little bit different than the backs that they have. The other backs that they have are more of the the bruisers, not as much of a breakaway guy. So I think if you're J.K. Dobbins, you give the Ravens something on the ground that they didn't have before they drafted him. Obviously, that's why they took him. The other thing is Mark Ingram's piling up the carries, and the shelf life of an NFL running back isn't that long. So Dobbins is in a good spot, without question.
I think so. I think the one thing that's kind of unfortunate for him is he really showed his durability during his time at Ohio State, and especially as a junior this past year, he really carried him, and down the stretch, he was the bell cow. He was a guy that they were relying on every week. And even in that Clemson game where he turns the ankle, sprains the ankle, has to leave, comes back, has to leave again, comes back, and then finishes the game strong. But that injury kept him out of the combine. And then obviously with everything that's happened since then, players didn't have pro days, players didn't get to go to workouts and visits. I imagine we'll find out later that probably played a role in why he fell as far as he did. Like I said, it actually ended up, I think, maybe a positive thing for him to fall to the team that he went to, because they are set up to really allow a running back to thrive.
Of the 7 that were taken over the 2 days of the draft, anybody surprise you going way up or way down where you thought they should have been?
Well, Damon Arnette going as high as he did surprised me. I know Kerry Combs, the defensive coordinator, who's back at OSU and who had recruited him to Ohio State back in 2015, he kind of predicted it when he talked to us and said, hey, he's going to go, don't be surprised at how high he goes in the draft. But I still was. I thought when he said that, he was talking about, whoa, this guy might be able to sneak into the first round. But to go all the way up at 19, and to also have the Raiders talking about how they had essentially passed up potential trade opportunities because they were worried that if they took one and fell back a few spots, that Arnette might not be there anymore. That surprised me. And it's interesting that someone who doesn't have a lot of size, doesn't have a lot of speed, was productive at Ohio State, but necessarily doesn't fit some of the parameters that you see now in a first-round NFL cornerback, someone that was apparently coveted that highly by maybe not just Raiders, by other teams. That caught me by surprise.
We're getting ready for day 3, so several more rounds. Who are some names from Ohio State that we might hear called in day 3 of the NFL draft?
KJ Hill was the one guy that I thought might have a chance to rise up into the 3rd round and give them 8 picks for these first 3 rounds. I would be pretty surprised if he fell out of the 4th or maybe into the top of the 5th, but a really productive slot receiver, kind of a prototypical slot receiver. I think there's a lot of NFL teams that could see someone with his skill set slotting right in. And someone else, I think, Jordan Fuller, Brandon Bowen, guys like that who are not necessarily projected as frontline guys in the NFL, but you can see a place on a roster where those guys can help because of either their versatility in Bowen's case as an offensive lineman, or Fuller just being a really steady, productive guy and the kind of player you want in your locker room, a lot of leadership qualities. And those things still do matter in the NFL.